King Shahryar had once been known for a gentle heart and a fair mind, but grief had reshaped him into someone colder, heavier, and distant from the world he ruled. Betrayal had entered his palace one night like a shadow slipping beneath a door, and once it settled in his heart, it refused to leave. The queen he had trusted had broken her vows, and something within him shattered, leaving only suspicion behind. From that day forward, he set a rule that frightened the entire kingdom. Every night he would choose a bride, and every dawn she would be gone forever. It was a cruel pattern, and yet no one could challenge it. His anger was too deep, and his sorrow too sharp for any advisor to soften. Even the wind that moved through the palace gardens seemed quieter, afraid to stir memories the king did not want. In the home of the royal vizier lived Shahrazad, a young woman known for her intelligence, grace, and courage. She spent her days reading ancient tales and her nights imagining new ones. She understood people in a way few did. She believed every heart carried both darkness and light, and that sometimes a story was the only lantern strong enough to guide someone back toward hope. Every evening she watched her father leave for the palace with a heavier step than the last. He returned with worry etched into his face, afraid that soon the kingdom would lose its spirit completely under the weight of the king's sorrow. One night, after hearing the news that yet another innocent girl had been taken to the palace, Shahrazad made a choice that froze her father in place. She asked to become the next bride. Her father nearly collapsed. He begged, argued, and pleaded, but she spoke calmly, telling him she had a plan. She had spent years collecting stories, learning their rhythm, understanding how they spoke to the heart. She believed she could reach the king in a way no one else had tried, not with advice, not with warning, but with imagination. Stories, she told her father softly, can lift the heaviest sorrows. They can heal wounds people no longer know how to speak of. And though he trembled, the vizier took his daughter to the king. That evening, Shahrazad entered the palace not as a prisoner, but with the bearing of someone who carried her own purpose. The guards watched her with curiosity. Servants stared at her long after she passed. There was something unusual about her, not arrogance, not fear, but a calm strength. When King Shahryar saw her, he noticed it too. She bowed respectfully, but her eyes met his with steady clarity. He was not used to that. Most brides collapsed into tears before the first hour passed, but Shahrazad stood like someone who understood her fate and still chose to walk toward it. The marriage ceremony was brief, done with the same ritual the king had repeated too many times. The palace grew still as the night deepened, and when Shahrazad entered the royal chamber, she moved with the quiet composure of someone carrying secrets in her mind. Shahryar stood by the window, watching the moonlight paint pale patterns on the marble floor. He did not speak. He did not look at her. His silence wrapped around the room like a heavy curtain. But Shahrazad breathed in gently, feeling the weight of the moment. "My king," she said in a soft voice that broke the stillness, "before dawn comes, may I tell you a story?" He turned like someone waking from a long, restless sleep. "A story?" he said, surprised. "Why?" "Because stories remind us that nothing stays broken forever, not even the hardest nights." Shahryar wanted to dismiss her. He wanted to send her away and remain alone with the bitterness he had grown familiar with. But something in her voice, something warm, something steady, made him hesitate. Against his own judgment, he nodded. So Shahrazad began. Her voice shaped images as clearly as a painter's brush. She told him of a merchant who accidentally angered a supernatural being and then had to face a fate he could not escape. She spoke of courage, sacrifice, and the thin line between fear and hope. The king did not move. He barely blinked. Her words slipped into the quiet corners of the room, chasing away shadows he thought were permanent. But when the first pale lines of dawn touched the sky, she stopped. Shahryar frowned. "Why did you end the story there?" "Because the tale is long," she answered gently. "If I finish it now, the heart of it will be lost. If you allow me to live another night, I will continue tomorrow." A long silence followed. For the first time in months, the king felt curiosity instead of anger. Something delicate, something he had not felt in years, stirred faintly inside him. "Very well," he said quietly. "You will tell the rest tomorrow night." And with those words, a new beginning entered the kingdom. Dawn spread across the palace in soft golden streaks, but the mood inside was strangely uncertain. Servants whispered as they moved through the halls. The king had allowed the new bride to live through the night. None of them had expected it. None dared to believe it could happen again. Shahrazad walked through the palace that morning with grace, knowing every step she took was borrowed time. Her calm presence unsettled the guards, who exchanged quiet looks as she passed, unsure what to make of her serenity. But Shahrazad had not come to survive for a day. She had come to change the course of a wounded man's heart. In the hours before sunset, she sat with her younger sister, Dunyazad, in a small room filled with cushions and sunlight. They whispered together, discussing the next story. Dunyazad's eyes were full of worry, but Shahrazad touched her hand gently, reassuring her. "I am not afraid. If my stories can help the king remember what hope feels like, then every moment here is worth it." When night returned, King Shahryar entered their chamber quietly, expecting fear or trembling. Instead, he found Shahrazad waiting with a book in her lap and a quiet smile resting on her face. The room felt different tonight, less heavy, almost warm, though he didn't understand why. He sat beside the window as he had the night before. "Continue your story." And she did. Shahrazad began where she had left off, describing how the merchant, facing certain doom, met 3 travelers. Each traveler carried a strange tale about his own past, and each pleaded with the supernatural being to spare the merchant's life. The king leaned forward slightly, though he didn't notice himself doing it. Her voice moved through the room like a gentle tide. There was no rush in her words, no fear in her tone. She told the story with a quiet confidence that pulled Shahryar's attention to every detail. For the first time in many months, he was not thinking about betrayal. He was not thinking about sorrow. He was simply listening. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The moon crossed the sky and the stars drifted slowly above the callous roof. Yet when dawn approached, Shahrazad calmly slowed her voice and softened her tone. "This is where we pause," she said. Shahryar turned sharply. "Again? The best part is still ahead. It would be unfair to rush it when the dawn is already here." He knew she was doing it on purpose. She was keeping her life by stopping each story at sunrise, but he couldn't bring himself to be angry. Something in him, a quiet, unfamiliar feeling, kept urging him to listen again tomorrow. "Very well," he murmured. "You live another day." But the atmosphere had changed. Shahrazad could see it in his eyes. The lines of anger around his mouth had softened, replaced by something more thoughtful. Even if he didn't admit it, the walls around his heart had begun to shift. Over the next days, this rhythm continued. Every night, Shahrazad told a story. Every night, Shahryar listened. And every morning, another page of his bitterness loosened. As the days passed, Shahryar began to notice things about her he had overlooked before. The way her hands moved gently when she spoke, the way her voice softened at emotional moments, the way she looked at the world with a quiet understanding he had long forgotten. He found himself anticipating nightfall, The palace seemed less cold, the gardens seemed less silent. Even his advisors approached him with a little less fear. But with each passing dawn, a question formed quietly in his mind. Was Shahrazad only saving herself? Or was she trying to save him too? He didn't dare ask. Not yet. The palace had changed. The once silent halls now carried soft echoes of life. Servants walked with lighter steps, unsure why the atmosphere felt different, but grateful all the same. The king no longer appeared with a storm on his face every morning, and that alone had brought calm to the kingdom. Shahryar, however, did not fully understand what was happening inside him. He still held tight to his distrust, but every night with Shahrazad added cracks to that shield. Her stories were not just tales, they were reflections, mirrors that showed him courage, kindness, loyalty, and forgiveness in 100 different forms. One evening, Shahrazad began a story about a fisherman who found a jar trapped beneath the sea. Inside the jar was a powerful spirit who spoke of revenge and bitterness, promising destruction to anyone who opened the seal. The fisherman trembled, unsure what fate awaited him, but he listened closely and responded with wisdom that surprised even the spirit. As Shahrazad told the tale, her eyes occasionally lifted toward the king, watching his expression shift with every twist. He did not notice at first, but the story was unraveling something deep inside him. The spirit in the story reminded him of himself, wounded, angry, locked in his own grief. The fisherman reminded him of someone he had once been, gentle, thoughtful, hopeful. When the story paused at dawn, Shahryar did not speak for a long moment. Shahrazad watched him quietly, sensing the storm beneath his silence. That day, instead of isolating himself, the king walked through the palace gardens. He touched the branches of the trees, something he had not done since the betrayal that broke him. The scent of jasmine and warm earth filled the air. Memories returned to him, memories of laughter in the palace corridors, of sunlight that once felt comforting, of nights he had believed in love without fear. He stopped beneath a wide fig tree, placing his hand against its rough bark. Was it possible, he wondered, that he could still feel something other than anger? That evening, he returned to Shahrazad's chamber earlier than usual. She looked up, surprised, but she did not comment. Instead, she invited him to sit closer than he had before, and he did. Her story that night followed a young prince who lost everything but found hope again through a wise traveler who reminded him of the value of mercy. Shahryar listened without moving. Something tightened in his chest, something he had not felt in years, a longing he had pushed away, a softness he had forgotten. When the story paused again at dawn, he felt frustration for the first time, not at Shahrazad, but at the rising sun. He wanted the night to continue. He wanted the story to go on. That morning, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he stood near Shahrazad, hesitating. "You speak of courage and mercy," he said quietly. "Do you believe people can truly change?" Shahrazad met his gaze with gentle honesty. "People do not change all at once," she answered, "but hearts remember what they were made for if someone reminds them." She did not say he was changing. She did not say he was becoming the man he once had been, but her words pressed softly against the truth building inside him. For the first time since his heartbreak, the king returned a small, quiet nod of understanding. That day, the kingdom breathed easier. Weeks had passed since Shahrazad first entered the palace. Her stories had become the heartbeat of each night. The kingdom watched from afar, waiting, wondering, hoping. No one dared speak of it openly, but whispers suggested the king's heart had begun to thaw. Yet inside Shahryar, A storm still rumbled. He felt drawn to Shahrazad in ways he could not explain, but fear clung to him like a shadow. He worried that trusting again would open the door to another betrayal. That night, before Shahrazad began her next story, he finally voiced the fear that had been growing inside him. "Why do you stay calm?" he asked, his voice rough. "You know what fate awaited every bride before you. Why did you not tremble? Why did you look at me without fear?" Shahrazad closed the book in her lap and looked at him with quiet compassion. "Because I saw more than what the world saw, my king. I saw a man grieving, not a man who wished to destroy, and I believed that grief could be healed." No anger arose in him, only a long exhale, like air leaving a tightly sealed room. She began her final story. It was about a king who let sorrow turn him into stone. Everyone feared him, and he believed he was beyond saving. But a traveler arrived at his palace carrying nothing but wisdom and stories. Each night the traveler told tales that slowly softened the king's hardened heart. In the end, the king realized that forgiveness was not a sign of weakness, but the first breath of freedom. As she spoke, Shahryar watched her closely. He knew the story was different. She was telling his story, and the realization struck him deeply. Dawn approached, but Shahrazad did not stop this time. She continued until the last word left her lips, until the final meaning settled in the quiet space between them. Silence filled the chamber. Shahryar felt his throat tighten. "Why did you finish it?" he asked. "Because this story does not need suspense," she said softly. "Only truth." He looked away, the weight of every choice he had made pressing against his chest. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel sorrow, not anger, not bitterness, but genuine sorrow for the lives lost to his grief. "Shahrazad," he said, his voice trembling, "I do not deserve forgiveness." She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "Forgiveness is not a reward. It is a beginning." In that moment, the walls around his heart cracked fully open. He turned to her with eyes that finally saw her, not as a bride chosen by fate, not as a storyteller saving her own life, but as the light that had guided him out of darkness. "You are free," he said quietly, "free to go, free to live your life beyond this palace. I will never harm you. You have given me back my humanity." Shahrazad felt her heart warm, not because of freedom alone, but because of the man now standing before her, a man no longer controlled by sorrow. "My king," she replied softly, "I do not wish to leave." And in that moment, he understood something even deeper. She had not been surviving, she had been healing him. The sun rose higher, casting golden light across the chamber, washing away the last remnants of the kingdom's long night. Later that day, the king made an announcement to the entire realm. His cruel decree was ended forever. No more fear, no more sorrow. Hope returned to the kingdom like rain to dry soil. And beside him stood Shahrazad, the woman whose courage and kindness had changed a king, saved a kingdom, and awakened love where darkness once lived. Their story became the most beloved tale in the land, proof that even the hardest hearts can find their way back to the light when guided by compassion, patience, and the power of a story well told.